All right, so again, we're becoming more and more practical now. This is a typical layout of a grant application. Now, every funder will have slight variations and slight differences. This is largely an NRF approach, but yeah, it's pretty much the same all over the world. I do have to put a caveat, you know, if you're working with industry, they're not going to have an application form, you know. They're more likely to say, give me a proposal. But then this layout might be, if you're battling for a layout, this layout might be useful for you. So, you know, we talked a little earlier about a covering letter. That's always useful to have. Obviously, your CV goes with applications. In the NRF online system, you know, your CV is always there. Keep it up to date rather than, you know, mad rush just before the application is due. Then the research application, the plan of research, often has this opening statement called a problem statement. And that, remember, folks, is where we put in this persuasive language particularly. Research aims. We'll talk more about them in a moment. Rationale and motivation, methods and work plan, potential outcomes, progress to date. Progress to date, remember Robert was talking about pilot studies. That's what you put it there. References, budget, letters of support. Remember I was talking about your ethics certificate can go there, or the head of the school who's doing the researching can attach that, and any other attachments that you want. One thing you need to be careful, those sections can be quite similar and you can end up duplicating yourself or repeating yourself, and you don't want to do that. So, you know, look at the whole application form and have it all clear where you're going to put what, so you don't end up repeating yourself. Now, the point that I'm making here, remember I talked about a coherent application. So from your problem statement, which is the broadest possible statement, down to the budget, which is the most specific statement in a sense, there must be coherence. So, you know, your budget mustn't have a trip to the Seychelles when you're studying obesity in Soweto. You know, what's the Seychelles got to do with it? Alternatively, if you're doing a comparative study of obesity in Soweto and the Seychelles, then I expect travel to the Seychelles in the budget. You know what I mean by coherence, okay? So all of these things must be coherent. Right. A little on each section. So the problem statement is this opening statement, and it's where you use the persuasive language to capture people's attention. I'm not going to go too much detail in this, but just a few helpful hints, I hope. Aims. Often they talk about aims and objectives, and some people get a bit confused between the two. And there's no standard way, but I recommend you do it this way. Use aims as strategic things. The big picture, the ultimate purpose, the overall thrust of your research, the overall aim. While the objectives are operational steps, they're building blocks, they're the headings for action phases. So keep your aims strategic and your objectives operational. And what I always say, it's probably best to have one aim, 4 or 5 objectives. But if you find you putting down 3 or 4 aims and each has about 10 or 12 objectives, it's becoming too complex, too much. I can't get my head around it as a reviewer. So don't dumb down the research, but make sure the research proposal is easy to read and understand. So one aim, maximum of 5 objectives. We won't go through the example. Rationale and motivation. Now, the rationale is why you're going to do it, and motivation, why you think it's important. And one way to structure this is to write what is known, what is not known, and why is it essential to find out. So what is known is like the literature review, and this is more your academic style of writing, quoting the literature, giving the full references. What is not known, this is different. You now sort of describing the area of the research and listing or discussing things that we don't know. And then why is it important to know that? Well, knowing that will help us to do X, Y, and Z, the impact of the research. So that's a way to structure the rationale and motivation. Methods and work plan. Well, the methodology is how you're going to do the research. Now, in chemistry, there's generally only ever one way to do it, but don't just assume that everybody knows that. Describe it. Social scientists are so much better at doing this than chemists, for example, because their methodology often impacts on the outcome of the research. So they have to, really understand a mixed methodology, quantitative, qualitative, all of those things that you have to bring in. So use the methodology to almost show off your expertise in understanding how to do the research. The work plan, I've spoken a lot about planning, very, very important. And I strongly recommend that you use a Gantt chart. What is a Gantt chart? That is a Gantt chart. So Henry Gantt was an industrialist in the first industrial revolution in the UK, I think. And he came up with this pictorial way of representing a project plan. And it consists of what has to be done here. So a list of activities, and you can use your objectives. Remember, objectives were operational. So you can use your objectives to describe the actions, the when, so the timeline. And you can see I've used simple Excel here, and I've just used two different columns for January. I've split the month into two. You could split it into 30 days or 31 days in January, but that's far too fine granular plan. And of course, if you're putting together, this is a 1-year plan, if you're putting together a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan, then you're not going to work in months. You might work in quarters or even 6 months periods in the plan across the time. And then, of course, the bar here, these colored bars here, represent the length that objective, that action, that work step will take to happen. So it'll start beginning of March and end somewhere around the middle of May. So that's the duration over there. And of course, this is the sequencing. I have to do this before I do that, and so forth. And then I've written here Rob and team and John and team. These are who will do the research. But you can also say, this here, objective 2, whatever that happens to be, might be field work. So that's when I'm in the school or I'm in the hospital or, whatever. So you could say here across this bar, field work, whatever. So the what, the when, and the who. And the who might include, field work, who, where it's done, basically, I guess. All right, and just note I've got a gap here. Second half of February, there's nothing planned. Second half of August, nothing planned. It doesn't mean I'm on holiday. It means there's a time buffer. So what is a time buffer? Well, if these things overrun, I underestimate, doesn't happen in a month, doesn't happen in half a month, overrun. There's a buffer to absorb that overrun so that it doesn't shift everything out and then I miss my final deadline over here. So you put these time buffers in after events that have high risk of not being completed. I'm not sure how long that will take, so I better put a time buffer in the program after that. And so if there's an overrun, I don't jeopardize my final deliverable. And the final deliverable often with research grants is when you have to produce the next report, your progress report. I have to have finished it by then. Because if my progress report is written in the future tense, then I'm not going to do very well. It has to be written in the past tense, stuff that I've completed. So that's the type of level of planning that one needs to do. Remember, I've emphasized this importance of planning. You do get very fancy tools. MS Project is one, but be careful. They take a lot of time to get used to. Simple Gantt chart is good, much quicker and easier. But do think about that planning, very, very important. Potential outcomes. So this is the deliverables. Now you must match your deliverables to your funders' needs. What do they want to see? Not what you want to see. Look, you can have stuff that you get out of it that they're not interested in. That's fine. Don't emphasize it in the application. Emphasize what they want to see in the application. And here, folks, you need to be really specific. So, if it's an NRF grant and they want publications, don't say, I'm going to produce 5 publications. It's not good enough. You're going to be second to that bear and the man running away, and the bear's going to eat you. So you've got to say 5 publications. These are their working titles, and these are the targeted journals that I'm going to publish them in. So it gives a sense that you've really thought through this, and you have, because you've got a working title in mind. Now, if you use the words working title and targeted journal, if in your progress report you say that, well, it turned out to be a different title and a different journal, that's okay. That's not a problem, because you can't be 100% sure before the fact how it's going to how it's going to work out. But I want you to give that thought that you're working, towards a specific publication, and I'm sharing the thoughts behind that publication. Also, if you talk about students, I'm going to graduate 2 PhD students. Tell me a bit about the students. If you know who they are, all the better. If you don't as yet, that's also okay. But tell me that, the type of student that I'm going to be working with is as follows. And by type, I mean, their academic strengths. The student has to be really strong in statistics to be able to help with this component of the research. The more specific you can be, the better. But also remember, you might find, well, hey, I can't be specific because I'm not 100% sure. I'll only know once the student arrives. Don't be fooled by that. Write your grant in the ideal world. This is what I hope will all come to pass. When you get the grant and the real world kicks in and it's slightly different, well, that's just par for the course. That's how things happen. But write your grant for the ideal world. I will get a brilliant student who's really very good at field work. That type of specific nature of the writing. Don't write it because I'm not sure, I'll take whatever student I can get. That doesn't give a good impression. I want this student. This is the student I'll be looking for. Very nice and specific. Progress to date, I won't say much more about this. This is the pilot study, and it's good to put in. Some people say I shouldn't, I don't want the pilot study mentioned because they might not fund me because I've already done the pilot study. No. The pilot study gives me a sense that this is doable research, and the plan is really good because it's already functioning. I think it's really good. Now, in South Africa, more and more they are asking you to align your research with national priorities, with university strategies and things like that. This is a growing importance here in South Africa. And so there are various ways to nest your research into various strategies. The university strategy, I've got a slide later on it. Local government, the national strategies, the NDP, I've got a slide on that for you. And international things like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So this is one section you could write once and use over and over again. I'll give you lots of material to help with that. Not going to go through all of this, but this is links to various descriptions of the National Development Plan. our NDP is about, I don't know, hundreds of pages long. So, you know, these summaries are quite useful. And I've summarized the targets for higher education. So if you can't fit it in anywhere else, at least you're contributing to the higher education. And here are all the targets summarized for you there, so you can use that. National priorities, you know, we talk or hear a lot of talk about them, but what are they? Well, here they are, the top 12 according to the NDP, the National Development Plan. And hopefully you can fit your research into one of those. So, you know, that might be helpful. I've got a couple of SONAs, you know, the State of Nation addresses summarized. This is the 2019-20. I've not been able to find nice summaries for 21 and 22, unfortunately. But yeah. And then the overall rallying cry is poverty, unemployment, and inequality. So can you talk about those? Will your research help those? That is always important. Other strategies, just for your use. I won't go through all of them. And then the sustainable development goals, and these are becoming more and more valuable to link your research, and they're quite broad. You know, life on land. So you know, lots of things can fit into that. Reduced inequality, sustainability, clean water and sanitation. I won't go through all of them, but try and link your research to one of these. And as I said, you can write this section once and use it over and over again. All right, let me pause there, see how everybody's doing. Are we okay? Everybody okay? Robert?
Yes, I wanted to quickly add, coming back to the deliverables, where you say it should be specific and so forth. I think I would like to say a word of warning. Often people tend to promise a lot, you know, like they will be producing 20 papers in Nature and Science. And they, as a reviewer, and I often served as a reviewer, you then look at the track record. What has the individual really produced over the last few years, annually averaged? And then it has to be realistic and credible. I mean, don't promise to write 20 papers if you have only written 5 papers in the last 10 years or so. So it's not credible.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, don't try and win your grant by over promising. You know, be realistic in what you can actually produce. And yes, if the reviewer will look at your track record and compare it to what you're promising, absolutely, very, very important. Another principle that I'm going to talk about in the budget is don't try and win your grant by putting in a very small budget as well. You know, in the hope that it's such a small budget, they'll just squeeze it in type of thing. Because the danger is that you get the grant and now you don't have enough money to do what you promised to do, and now you're stuck. And then they'll get to know this and next time might not want to support you. So be realistic in your promises of deliverables and be realistic in the cost of the project. Thanks, Robert.
Welcome.
Right. So back we go. I hope everybody's still on board. So just very quickly, I just want to emphasize the WITS strategy, and it really boils down to this slide. We encourage research with impact. And what does that mean? Discovery research that enhances a discipline. So that can be, I don't know, string theory, or translational research that enhances policy, practice, and professional activities. You know, that you use your knowledge to improve practice and policy. And then innovative research that enhances, and this has changed a little. Just yesterday, the new innovation strategy has improved, and we regard innovation very broadly, not only about enhancing economy. Look, you can spin off a company or something, that's part of innovation, but innovation is also making a difference in a community. So it's much more like translational research, and can be very broad. But that's what we're after. So research that has a meaning, makes a difference, has an impact. And, you can always use that as an explanation.